Welcome, everyone, to our Nurses Advocating for Change First Steps in Engaging the Legislative Process webinar. I am Patricia Moulton. I'm Executive Director of the North Dakota Center for Nursing. And today on our webinar, we will also have Constance Kalanick. She is our Legislative Monitor. She was also formerly the Executive Director of the North Dakota Board of Nursing. She's our Legislative Monitor for the Center for Nursing. And we will also have Nancy Johnson, who is a Public Consumer Board member on our Board of Directors and a former North Dakota State Representative. I would first like to thank the Nurses Day at the Legislature Planning Committee. Our co-chairs are Tammy Buchholz from Bismarck and Sarah. Also from Bismarck, we have a lot of members from across the state that have not only planned this conference call and webinar today, but have also planned our Nurses Day at the Legislature event, which will be February 6th at the Capitol. I would also like to thank our sponsors. Our Nurses Day premier sponsor is the North Dakota Nurse Practitioner Association, and we also have a Nurses Day sponsor of the North Dakota Nurses Association. Today our webinar will include some information to get you started in our legislative session. It includes a brief review on how a bill becomes a law, finding and contacting your legislators, advocacy versus lobbying, tours of our website and the legislative page, a review of calendar dates, an overview of our Nurses Day and our legislative platforms, our policy briefs, the legislative tracking sheet that our monitor uses, and a link to our advocacy and health policy webinar. So let's get started. The first thing that we're going to talk about is a brief review on how a bill becomes a law. Laws can be made a couple different ways. They can be made by elected officials through the legislative branch, which is primarily what we're talking about today, and we'll be talking about throughout the legislative session. But keep in mind that laws can also be made by a vote of the people, and these are through referendums or initiatives. The medical marijuana measure that was recently passed in the November elections is an example of this. So how does a bill become a law? Well, first it has to be passed by the legislature, which is divided into two different chambers. Both of the chambers, the House and the Senate, must pass the same bill. If one of the chambers passes a different version of the bill, they have a conference committee where they then decide which bill is going to go through the final signing. The bill must be signed by the governor's office, the executive branch. Without a signature, the bill does not become law. The governor does have a veto power. He can send it back to the legislature, but the legislature with a 2/3 supermajority vote can override the governor's veto. The power to sign veto legislation is one of the most significant tools at the disposal of the governor. And certainly legislators want their legislation to be signed into law, so the governor can use this to shape legislation. Finally, when the bill becomes law, not everything is over. It has to be implemented according to the text in the law. So some laws go into effect immediately while others have a specified date. Per the Constitution, most bills passed by the Legislative Assembly go into effect on August 1st after being filed with the Secretary of State, but they can also include an emergency clause in the law that becomes effective the day the governor signs the bill. Some of the bills that have already been introduced this session do have an emergency clause. The executive branch is charged with executing and implementing the laws passed by the legislature and signed by the governor, and then various executive agencies may be assigned responsibilities in implementing and enforcing them. They also may develop additional procedures to fill in the blanks. So for instance, when a Nurse Practices Act change is signed into law, the North Dakota Board of Nursing is then tasked with implementing the law, which may include developing additional administrative rules. So is it really this simple? Well, yes and no. This is how the system works, but there's a lot that goes behind the scenes, and this is why the North Dakota Center for Nursing hires a legislative monitor. So this time I would like to turn it over to Connie Kalanick, our legislative monitor.
Thank you, Patricia. The role of the legislative monitor. A legislative monitor is different than a lobbyist. The monitor tracks and identifies legislation of interest to the North Dakota Center for Nursing and its members. However, the legislative monitor does not lobby individuals or provide testimony. That legislative monitor may assist with the drafting the testimony, but does not deliver it. So the various areas that are identified in the slide, I track, monitor, and report on legislation that's related to healthcare and public policy. and nursing practice. So it's not just specific to nursing practice, but it's related. So I've been attending hearings that are related to public policy that comes through the Department of Human Services or the Department of Health. I review the calendar for legislative committee meetings. Now, there are many ways in which an individual can track. They now have an app for that, and it makes it much easier for individuals to track legislation. So I'd encourage you to go to the website and download the information that you need, and then download the app from the App Store. I track legislative bills in order of priority. They're set by the center. I have a weekly review of the proposed legislation. So that's Friday at noon, Central Standard Time. So please feel free to join us for that review. I give a review of things that have happened over the week, but individuals who have also been at committee hearings will provide information as well. Review and consult on committee testimony if desired, like I said earlier, and maintain regular and ongoing contact with Patricia, who is the Executive Director of the Center for Nursing. The next slide is the steps in the bill-making process. The bill is prepared by Legislative Council if a legislator is introducing the bill. So the Legislative Council works for the legislators. It does not work for boards and other government agencies. It's strictly for legislators. Then once the bill is drafted, the bill is introduced. The legislator introduces the bill by handing it to the bill clerk if the presiding officer calls for the introduction of the bills. So this can happen in the House or in the Senate. And then at that point, the bill is read and the title is read, and then it is assigned to a proper committee. So many of the bills that we are interested in will be either in appropriations, human services, on either side. There are infrequently assigned to other committees such as industry, business, and labor, or judiciary, but primarily the Human Services Committee. Once that goes to committee, then a hearing is scheduled, and then individuals can testify on that particular piece of legislation. Once the bill is heard and the committee has a chance to discuss the bill, then the bill will be reported out of committee. And there's 4 different ways it can come out of committee. It can be unfavorable, with or without an amendment. It can be favorable, with or without an amendment. It can be without and recommendation and with or without an amendment. That's very confusing. And request that the bill be referred to another committee with or without an amendment. That happens on occasion if the individual legislators feel like the bill would be handled better in another committee. So this morning, I witnessed several bills that were passed in the Senate Human Services Committee. They were passed favorably, and they were without amendment. So they will be carried to the floor by an individual in the Human Services Committee. So then this is the steps in the bill process continued. Calendar placement and consideration of amendments. All bills are placed on the calendar for final passage. If there's an amendment, the amendment needs to be voted on first, and then the actual bill, once the amendment's adopted, will go before the House or the Senate for approval or not approval. The second House consideration, if the second House passes the bill, then it is enrolled, signed by the presiding officers, and sent to the governor. As Patricia said earlier, the bill that goes to the governor, if a bill, I'll backtrack a minute here. If a bill comes out of the House, it's passed, and it goes to the Senate, and the Senate amends it, then it needs to go back to the House for consideration. The governor receives one bill for signage, and that's called a conference committee. The conference committee discusses the bill and makes recommendations to both the House, and then they must approve it in the same form. If it's if it's a bill that has a fiscal note, it takes effect July 1st. Otherwise, it's August 1st unless it has an emergency clause. And then a veto, that can only be vetoed by the governor. If that should happen, which is very rare, it becomes law by 2/3 vote in both houses. Voter referral, a bill that becomes a law may be repealed by a referendum or a vote of the electorate. The initiated measure, a law may also be proposed and acted upon by the electorate through this through this process. And an example of an initiated measure in this past November is the marijuana law. Okay, this is a rather elementary depiction of how a bill becomes a law. We did check to see if there was something a little more, less elementary, I guess is a good word, on how a bill becomes a law. But it does walk you through it very clearly as to how that process works. So the next slide is on what's the point of a committee. It's tough to work through a brand new pieces of legislation in a body composed of dozens of members. I'm sure many of you have belonged to organizations that that have multiple members and then must divide up into subgroups to each deal with a specific part of the process before you. So in this case, the bill goes to the legislature, but then it's broken down and it goes to the various committees. Bills often go through many changes, everything from typos to simple changes in language. Sometimes there are mistakes made in the drafting, and then the typos or changes need to be made. And then this also allows the committees allow for more negotiation. So if there's individuals who are in support of the bill, and then there's individuals who are opposed, but maybe opposed only to a certain part of it and have a concern, they can come together to draft a bill that can come out of committee with a favorable response and secure the votes they need for passage. Are there different committees for the House and Senate? Absolutely. They're broken down into similar committees on each side, but they both must hear the bill. And all bills that are submitted must be heard and must be voted on. That's different here in North Dakota. In many states, if a bill does not get through the House and the Senate, or if they have a unicameral legislature, then it just dies. Interim committees. There are many individuals through the Center for Nursing that were involved with the interim committees. This meets between legislative sessions to really look in depth, do some research and education on various issues. The members are both for the House and the Senate. We've heard a lot about behavioral health this session so far, and I know one of the committees, there were 18 members on that committee that dealt with many of the issues related to behavioral health. Here is a listing of the various committees, and there, as you can see, there's a wide variety. I spent some time with a legislator this morning who was on the Agriculture Committee and then on the Human Services Committee. So the idea is to be appointed to a committee that provide, you have some background in, for one thing, and also have an interest in as well as a legislator. The legislative committees continued. It's what is the role of the committees in screening bills and coming out with a do pass or do not pass. Again, the committees hold public hearings, and they're posted for a certain date, time, and place, and you can find that on the website. Individuals are invited to provide testimony. Individuals that represent a department or a division in state government are invited to provide information. And then committee members discuss the merits of the proposed legislation, the problems, the overall impact of the legislation, if it's passed or not passed. Also, potential amendments to the bill or resolution are discussed and considered. A bill may be proposed, and then an organization will suggest an amendment that makes it a better bill, or would creates a situation where there is a situation where the bill would not pass. So the amendment helps it to go through the House and then go through the Senate. After all of this is concluded, then the committees vote on a recommended course of action. And for example, the committee that I attended this morning, the vote was 6 do pass, 1 do not pass. So that bill will come out of committee, and then an individual from that committee will carry the bill to the floor. What is the role of the committee in screening bills? Again, like I said earlier, they hold public hearings, individuals provide testimony, they discuss the merits, the potential amendments that need to be done, and after all of that, then recommend a course of action. So legislators on other committees, for example, with the Human Services Committee, other legislators, say, for example, on business, industry, and labor, really depend very heavily on the committees to screen those bills and provide the input that they will need for a do pass or a do not pass on the floor. And again, the proposed legislation are summarized as do pass, do not pass, amend and do pass, amend and do not pass, and then without a recommendation. Legislative committees continued. Once the committee process is completed, the legislation is reported back to the respective chambers. Committees cannot kill bills. I spoke to this briefly earlier. All bills that are submitted must be acted upon. The bill cannot die in committee. This, as you know, is not the case in Congress. All legislation must be considered by the committees and will have a vote on the floor of their respective chamber. Often both chambers of the legislature will pass similar but not identical legislation. This I also briefly talked about earlier. The intent may be mostly the same, but the wording be a bit different. And sometimes legislation passed by the two houses may be virtually opposite. So then they need to come together and redraft the proposed legislation. And the example that when that should happen is that it's likely if different parties constitute majorities in the two houses. For example, the Republicans control the House and the Democrats control the Senate. Legislative committees continued. In order for legislation to be sent to the governor's office to be signed into law, both chambers of the legislature must pass identical pieces of legislation. When similar but different laws have been passed, then they go to a conference committee. The conference committee is composed of 6 members, 3 from the House, 3 from the Senate. Members of the conference committee are charged with merging common elements of the different pieces of legislation previously passed by each of the 2 chambers and reaching an agreement for language to be used in the sections of the legislation that differ.
Before you begin advocating, you need to know who to contact. So on the screen, you'll see how you find your legislators. North Dakota has 47 legislative districts, and that can be changed by the legislature. Each district is represented by 3 individuals, 1 senator, and 2 representatives. If you want to find your legislator, if you don't know it, there's the contact or the website where you can put your address in, and then it will automatically find what district you're in. So if you're unsure, that's how you can find it. It's important to do that because it means more to a legislator if you are from her or his district when you speak to them. Also, if you're wanting to visit with committee members on the committee that's going to hear the bill that you're interested in, it would be helpful to find out the legislators on the committee and what district they're from so you can find a connecting point with them. Maybe they have a hospital that you're interested in their district that you can tie in a connection there. Maybe you've got students from that area that you can tie in a connection with. So it's important to kind of find a connection so that they have a reason to listen to what you have to say. And when you're going to visit with them, you have to have a message. So to develop your message, it's very important to know what you want to convey to them. What are you hoping to get out of this message? what's helpful is to have what we call an elevator pitch. And that's what can you say in about 30 seconds that will explain what's important in the legislation, what's the goal of the legislation, and what do you want somebody to remember when you walk away from that. So use your organizations to help you pattern or form that message so that it's the same message that they get from everybody in your organization. And you want to have that match what you say in the public too. Talking points should be consistent with the legislation. Why is this important? If you aren't consistent, you're sending mixed messages and they will not remember what your message is. One question I always ask lobbyists or advocates when they were talking about proposed legislation is, what's your opposition going to say? And as I was thinking through a particular message or bill, I always asked two questions. Who is going to benefit from this legislation? And who may be harmed or affected by the legislation? So be sure to have that idea in mind when you're doing it. If you don't frame the message, your opposition will frame it for you. And so the way the message comes out, the framing of the message is very important, and that should be a priority. So during a legislative session, how can I contact my legislators? Very easy. You can email them, leave a message with the telephone message center, and the numbers are on your screen. Or you can send an email. You can find the email addresses on the legislator's biographical page. When you email, keep in mind that it's important to have one topic to an email. Be as brief as possible, but get the information out that you need to get out. And a little aside note here, actually, since emails are becoming so common, a personal letter may have a bigger impact. Meeting with the legislator. If you're scheduling the meeting, be sure to schedule it in advance, and it might be difficult to do that to pin down someone during the day. Allow the legislator to take the lead and identify a good time for them, and then make your timeline fit that as best possible. Identify yourself as a constituent and let them know the purpose of the meeting. You may have to do a walk and talk meeting. You may just catch them as you're going down the hallway and that's when your 30-second elevator speech comes in handy. Dress professionally. That will boost your credibility. Go with a concrete ask. Be specific. Prioritize your request. Use those talking points that were developed earlier, and be concise. Do your homework, and as I said, know what the arguments on the other side might be so that you can prepare responses to those. And quite often you will be asked, what's the cost for implementing the recommendation? So if you can find out that cost, it's important to do that. If you can, provide written material to leave with them, such as a fact sheet, a position paper, a brochure, that you can hand to them. Be aware that the more concise that is, the better, because they will, if it's a 6-page memo, they're not going to read a 6-page memo. Develop trust. Don't lie. Very important. Your role as an advocate, if you're caught in a lie, your credibility is shot. If you don't know the answer, say you don't know the answer, but I will get that information and get it back to you. Personalize the issue by illustrating a story about how it impacts the constituents in their district. It means more to a legislator if they know someone that it will impact. So if you can find that personal connection, that's important. Volunteer to be a resource contact so they get information from you and not from another source. Give them your contact information, up-to-date business card with phone numbers. And always follow up with a thank you note and enclose any information that you promised to provide. And I'll tell you, follow-up notes are very rare. So if you do that one step, you will be remembered. Testifying before a legislative committee, it's a daunting, scary thought. As chair of a legislative committee for 4 years, I had 3 levels of testifiers that I told my committee to be prepared for. One was the paid lobbyist. This is that professional person that is paid to lobby for an organization. I told my committee members, you can ask them the most difficult questions you want. The second level of testifiers is the individual who works in the field, that's knowledgeable of what's going on, but's a volunteer coming to talk. You can ask some pertinent questions, get information from them how it would work, but not ask the super difficult questions. The third level was interested people, people that cared about what was going on. Could be a student that's in one of the nursing programs. With those individuals, I asked my committee to be gentle. Actually, I said, pretend like it's your grandmother up there so that you don't embarrass them, don't make it hard for them. But every citizen has a right to testify before the legislature. Legislators are your friends and your neighbors. They want to hear what you have to say. They truly do. They value testimony from our citizens, and especially for someone that shows a passion for the topic. As mentioned earlier, every bill has a public committee hearing where you can testify. If you're planning to testify, make sure you're early for the hearing, plan your testimony, and have a written copy available. A little side note, it helps to have it 3-hole punch and double-spaced. And if you can hand it out to the committee clerk before you testify and let her or him pass it out, or if you're going to pass it out just as you start to testify, split the pile so that it doesn't take quite as long for it to go around the tables. If you're testifying with the group, get help in locating what the issues are. Contact the North Dakota Center for Nursing to help locating others that might be testifying on nursing issues. And if you can, kind of coordinate what your message is and who's going to talk about what part of it. Having chaired some committees where we get people coming up and different people saying the same thing over and over, pretty soon you start to tune out as a legislator and your message gets lost. You might hear the chair say, does anyone have any new information, which is a good sign for you to say, oops, they don't want to get up and repeat things. They want to see if there's anything new. When you get to the room, sign in the witness sheet at the lectern. Now, even if you don't testify, be sure to sign in and indicate you're as a proponent or an opponent of the bill. The chairman at the beginning will announce the hearing of the particular bill. The clerk will read the bill title, and then the legislative sponsor will generally be the first to speak about the bill, and then the chairman will ask for testimony. They'll ask for proponents of the bill first, and then they will ask, the chair will ask for opponents of the bill. As you're testifying, start your remarks by addressing the chairman and committee members, Senator X, and members of the Human Services Committee. My name is, and I live in wherever you happen to live, so that they know who you are and where you're from and that you're a North Dakota citizen. They would like to know that information up front. Be brief and as informal, so you kind of be conversational, kind of tell a story. If you can, stay away from your abbreviations and jargon. Most of the legislators won't know what you're talking about, and they'll try to spend time trying to figure out what you're saying or what that abbreviation meant, and not listening to your message. When you're going to be asked a question, the committee member will first ask to get attention from the chair. The chair will then acknowledge the legislator, and then that legislator will ask you the question. When you are responding to that, you first say, Mr. or Madam Chair or Chair X, and then you go and identify the legislator, Representative or Senator Y, and then answer the question. It's a little cumbersome, but it's the way to keep an order in the committee process. If a representative or senator has a repeat or an additional question to ask you as you're testifying, it will go through the same process again. They will get the floor from the chair, and then you would address the chair and then the particular legislator. If you don't know something again, make sure you say, I don't know that information, but I would be willing to give it to you. And to whom should I give it? Would it be to the chair or would it be to Representative or Senator Y? If you're going to testify on behalf of an organization, check the lobbying rules, because when you're testifying as part of it or on behalf of an organization, you may be considered a lobbyist. If you're advocating as an individual for a bill, even though you belong to another organization, you aren't a lobbyist. So always check in on that. All committee meetings are public, so you can come and go as you like and listen in. Be quiet as you enter and exit the room. But even if the door is shut, it is still a public meeting and you can go in. It's just shut so that it can be a little quieter and the meeting can be held. They're all recorded. So if on the spur of the moment somebody's testifying and you decide in your heart that you just have to say something, you do not have to have written testimony. You can get up, again, the same process, identify yourself, where you're from, but then you can put what you want to say out in the record too. So that's.
Thank you, Nancy. So a frequent question that I get asked is, what is the difference between advocacy versus lobbying? And so to explain the answer to that question, we're going to go to the North Dakota Century Code, which defines a lobbyist as any person who in any manner whatsoever, directly or indirectly, performs any of the following activities. So this includes attempts to secure the passage, amendment, or defeat of any legislation. So in essence, this means if you are trying to get a particular bill passed or amended, that is considered lobbying. If you're attempting to influence decisions made by legislative council or by an interim committee. So that also includes testifying before an interim committee meeting during the interim session. However, this does not apply if you're a legislator, a private citizen appearing on your own behalf. So every citizen in the state, if you have a particular wish for any bill or legislation, all you have to do is get up and say, I am so-and-so from X city, and I am testifying on my own behalf. And in that case, you're not considered lobbying because you do have a right to provide your take on any piece of legislation. The rule does also not apply if you're an employee, officer, board member, volunteer, or agent of the state or political subdivision acting in that capacity. So when a legislative committee calls, say, the North Dakota Board of Nursing or the State Department of Health for more information about a particular bill, that does not count as lobbying either. If you're invited to appear before the council, interim committee, or standing committee to provide information. So if a committee calls and contacts you, even if you are in a state government position or at a healthcare facility, if they've invited you to appear, that also does not count as lobbying. And if an individual that appears before a committee for the purpose of providing testimony on behalf of a trade, professional organization, business, or industry, if introduced by a registered lobbyist. So, for example, I am the registered lobbyist for the North Dakota Center for Nursing, and so last week we had a hearing on behalf of the Nursing Faculty Loan Repayment Bill, in which I made a very distinct point to introduce the individuals that I invited to testify. That is to ensure that they are not violating any of the lobbying rules of the state. The North Dakota Secretary of State administers the lobbyist registration law, and information on registration is available from the Secretary of State. So if you believe that you are interested in lobbying for a particular organization, I encourage you to check out the Secretary of State website and the rules regarding how to apply for that. Advocacy versus lobbying continued. Advocacy is identifying, embracing, and promoting a cause. This cause could be an appeal to individuals to change their behavior, employers to change rules, or the government to change laws. So today we mostly are talking about the legislature, but certainly advocacy is used in other settings as well. And lobbying refers to specific advocacy that is an effort to attempt to influence legislation. So now we're going to depart a little bit from the website, and I might have to close the slide presentation if this doesn't work quite right. But I wanted to show you some of the key resources on our advocacy website. So I'm going to click on that link and see if it comes up in our window here. So you should have on your screen our Advocacy Center, and the website is there. You can get to it off of our homepage. It's under our platforms, Advocacy. And on our Advocacy Center, we have provided you with a lot of resources. The biggest resource during the legislative session is that we post our legislative updates on our website. And in fact, our most recent update is right here, the January 6th legislative update. We also post the information about our update calls, so everyone is invited to all of our legislative update calls. They're every Friday at 12, and our first one started last Friday. So you actually get onto the call exactly the same way you got onto this webinar today, clicking on the link to see the documents and to dial the phone number. We also keep on our advocacy website our policy briefs. These are the current policy briefs that have been moved through a particular process in order to ensure that it is a policy that is widespread among the nursing community. So they are developed to represent 40-plus nursing organizations and our board of directors. The current ones are listed on the website. The newest policy brief is regarding the compact licensure bills. I haven't put it on the website yet because it was just passed last Thursday, but I will get that on there soon. I also want to point out that we have an advocacy FAQ section of our website, and as soon as it comes up here, it has a lot of frequently asked questions and direct links. So if you want to see how to search for a bill or figure out who your legislators are, there are links directly to those sections of the websites. And also under advocacy resources, we have our videos. We will also be posting this video here on our advocacy video website, but we'll also be posting it on we also have a YouTube account and a video section of our website. We also have some other advocacy videos, and we have direct links to a lot of different resources, not only the North Dakota level, but we also have our senator and Congress links as well. So I want to carry us back to our PowerPoint, which is also a tour of the North Dakota State Legislative website. So I'm going to bring the window over there. So this is the North Dakota Legislative Branch website. So I want to point to some specific links. The first thing is the 65th Assembly. This is our current Legislative Assembly website. So everything about what's going on right now in our legislative session is on this link. Under this particular website, you can go and see all the House and Senate members. You know, we just had elections in November, so some of those have changed. You can see who's on each of the different committees, the House and Senate committees, and then you can also see the deadlines in the organizational session from here. Also on the website, I want to point out to you the calendar. It will have in general the legislative events. These are the biggest deadlines. They don't put every single session on the legislative calendar, but it is helpful, especially actually during the interim session, because they do post the interim committee meetings on this. Also of interest, I think, to a lot, and I think it's an underutilized resource, is the video streaming. They do not video stream the committee meetings, but they do video stream the floor sessions, which typically occur about 1 o'clock each day. So anyone can watch them, the House or the Senate floor session. And so you can obtain those there. You can also obtain previously recorded videos just by going to that particular date and clicking on that particular floor session video. At the very bottom of the website are a lot of quick links. Nancy previously talked about finding your legislator. You can put your house number and zip code in here, and it will show you all of your legislators. You can search for them by district or by just simply alphabetical order in their biographies. So for instance, I'm just going to pick a legislator here under biographies. This is Bill Ammerman, which I do not know, but we will find out now.
Been there a long time.
Been there a long time. So you'll see under his biography, he's from Foreman. You'll see that, like Nancy mentioned, he's been in many different legislative sessions. So under his biography, you can see he's a Democrat for the House of Representatives in District 26. You can see that right now his committees are Government, Veterans Affairs, Industry, Business, and Labor. And during the interim, he was on these 3 committees. And we'll see. I haven't seen what kind of bills. He's introduced a bunch of bills. So you can actually look at any time what kind of bills the legislators have introduced.
He's only introduced one. He's just co-sponsored.
Oh, okay. He's only introduced one. He's co-sponsoring. Actually, this looks like the last legislative session of 64th. But you can find all of that by looking under the biographies as well. There's also a link directly to the Century Code. So you can look at various pieces of the Century Code and the administrative rules. We mentioned that the Century Code is the law and the administrative rules are developed by the agencies. And so these are the links to all of the rules. And so I wanted to search for a bill. This is how a lot of us actually use this, other than using the tracking system. But if you want more information about the tracking system, we can share that with you as well. I'm going to search for Bill 2034 because that is the faculty loan repayment bill. So when you search for a bill, you just put it in the little box up here, and you'll see that there are some actions. Since it's early in the session, there's not a lot of actions on here. But for this particular bill, you'll see that it has been introduced. It has the first reading, like Connie mentioned, that there is a reading inside the Senate floor session. It was referred to the Human Services Committee on January 3rd, and they held a committee hearing on at 1 o'clock on the 4th. As it goes through the session, there'll be a lot of other actions, all journaled here. You can also see the various versions of the bill. And so for a bill, you'll see who it was introduced by. In this case, this bill was introduced by the Health Services Committee. It was an intern committee. They can also be introduced by agencies, and they're called agency bills, or they can be introduced and sponsored and co-sponsored by legislators. And there's also, in this case, a fiscal note. A lot of bills do have fiscal notes. This indicates what the financial impact and or the budget expected for that particular bill. So you can find all of that in there. The video, which is not there yet, but like I mentioned, they do video the floor sessions. So once this bill is heard on the floor, you can watch the video from when it was introduced by the committee and any comments that were made during that time. And I will go back to our PowerPoint. So as far as the legislative calendar goes, I mentioned that a lot of that is on the calendar on the legislative website. The session started on January 3rd this year. The session can be no more than 80 days, so right now they're projecting it to end around April 26th. Although they did kind of an interesting change last week. They had 2 days where they had just had committee meetings all day, so they did not gavel into the floor or Senate, which gave them 2 more days of legislative session time. You'll see that there are deadlines for when bills can be introduced. So after January 9th today, no more than 5 bills can be introduced by each representative. And then the Senate deadline is January 23rd. So there's deadlines for when different bills and resolutions can be submitted. The crossover date for all bills is February 24th. So as we mentioned, a bill is heard in one side, and then it will cross over if it still is in play, if it has been passed. It will cross over to the other side. And they all have to cross over by February 24th. They have a short recess. And then there's deadlines for when the resolutions and the various bills have to be passed. As far as other dates, this morning, the North Dakota Nurse Practitioner Association held a legislative breakfast. We will have our Center for Nursing Nurses Day at the Legislature on February 6th. If you have not registered, I encourage you to go to our website to do so. The North Dakota Nursing Association and the Nurses Student Association of North Dakota will have a Nurses Day at the Legislature on February 20th. To give you an idea of what's happening on our Nurses Day, we are actually going to be utilizing the Heritage Center, which is right across the street from the Legislative and the Capitol, primarily because we have a lot of people that attend Legislative Day, and it's a way to help with that. We will have exhibitors set up and participant registration early in the morning, and we'll have a welcome and overview in the auditorium at the Heritage Center from 8:15 to 8:45. After that, we will be giving all participants a list of all the hearings that day, and we encourage all the participants to attend hearings. We are scheduling tours as well for the morning through Legislative Council. And we are also having presentations and stream select hearings in the Russell Reed Auditorium. So depending on what kind of hearings are happening at the Capitol, if it's something of high interest to a lot of nurses, we are going to live Facebook stream into this auditorium, but also on our Facebook platform, those hearings. We're asking participants to have lunch at the Capitol on their own and hopefully to contact their legislators to eat lunch with them. We went over how to contact your legislators in this webinar today. And then we're encouraging everyone to sit in on the House and Senate floor sessions. and we're going to work on getting as many nurses on the actual session with legislators as possible. Otherwise, there's ample room for everyone on the balcony. And then we'll have a meet and greet with legislators with yogurt, parfaits, and fruit cups in the memorial and legislative halls following the sessions. So to talk about where everything is at the Capitol, this is the map of the ground floor of the Capitol. I know it's kind of small on the screen, but all of the hearings, the committee hearings, occur in a lot of these rooms. So you'll see there's kind of a horseshoe circle of a lot of the committee hearing rooms, but they're dotted kind of all over on this floor. So 19, for instance, is the Kakawea room. There's a lot of sessions. I've attended a lot in the Rough Rider room. As you see, it's a House Appropriations. Some of the larger committees get some of the larger rooms that are there all week. But they're kind of scattered throughout the ground floor. You'll also see this is the first floor. So you go up the steps when you go into the entranceway. Memorial and Legislative Hall is where we're going to have exhibits on Nurses Day, and if you're out there on other days, that's where organizations that are holding a particular day have their exhibits. And the entrance into the chambers are here as well. So the House chamber is on the southern part of the map, and the Senate chamber is on the north part of the map. So there is a very limited, in fact, I'm not sure there's much seating in the back here. This is where you would sit with your legislators on the floor. Otherwise, the vast majority of people that want to watch a floor session sit in the balcony. And so you go up the stairs to get to that on the third floor. So this is where the Senate and floor chambers are. Various organizations do have legislative platforms, so I have a couple of them on the screen today. The North Dakota Nurse Practitioner Association indicated that they're interested in promoting policy that contributes in a positive fashion to the healthcare industry. They have several points about how they implement this, and you can go to their website for more information about what bills and issues that they support. The North Dakota Nurses Association also promotes legislation, policies, and strategies that help meet North Dakota's most pressing needs. They have a number of specific topics that they are working on this legislative session, and you can also go to their website for more information about their platform as well. The North Dakota Center for Nursing, as far as our policy priorities, this is based, like I mentioned earlier, on our policy briefs that have gone through a review process and voted on by our Board of Directors. So during the 2017 legislative session, we have 3 policy briefs that we will be actively lobbying for. The Nurse Licensure Compacts policy brief, this is for passing the APRN Nurse Licensure Compact, which is a new compact that the Board of Nursing is working on, and it's also for an enhanced nurse licensure compact through the state. We also have a faculty loan repayment policy brief, which is working to try to implement a new nursing faculty loan repayment program. And we also have a committee and several individuals that works on some behavioral health definitions, and so we have a policy brief on that. These other policy briefs we have passed and are current on our website. We will utilize those if a bill comes out on that particular item. So for instance, if there is a community paramedic bill that is submitted that at this time we don't know of any, but if there is, we would utilize this policy brief to help testify on that issue. Also, like I mentioned earlier, I actually showed you this already. We do update our legislative tracking and updates every Friday morning on our Advocacy website. And at this time, I'm going to click over and let Connie talk to you a little bit about what is on the tracking sheet. It'll take me just a minute to get over there and Connie to get back on the phone. So when you do go look at our tracking sheet, this is what you'll see. Connie, do you want to talk a little bit about how it's formatted?
Yes. Are you going to be putting up the actual table?
Yep, I just put the table up.
Okay, it just hasn't come through yet, I guess. Okay, here. Okay, you'll see the legislative tracking table. It's dated January 6, 2017. So every Friday we'll be having the legislative update at noon, and the dates will roll. So the next update will be January 13th. So hopefully, with the assistance of my fellow nurses, we will have a very up-to-date tracking piece for you to look at, and it'll be perhaps easier for you to follow. We're hoping anyway. So anyways, the bills are listed, bill number, and it starts with the House bills. The House bills start with 1,000, so they will be listed first, and they'll be sequential. So you may have, they'll always insert the next number. So as you're flowing through the table, you can look at them that way. The bill sponsors are listed next, and many of the committees or many of the bills that you see now have come out of like Health Reform Committee, Human Services Committee, those interim committees that study the various bills. And then I'll have a short description of the bill that's listed. Some are not very short because the summaries are actually quite long and in-depth, but try to give you a snapshot view of what that particular piece of legislation would look like. Then when you get to the status and upcoming hearings, what I'm trying to do here, and I know the one that you're looking at now, the blue is too dark, and so I will lighten that for next week. Those are the bills that were heard that week or previously. The bills that will be heard the following week after the noon update will be highlighted in yellow. So if you look through the table, there are many bills that have been highlighted in yellow. We have many appropriation bills, but as well there are many bills that are being heard in all the various committees and then being taken to the floor. So as you flow through it, you'll see that it goes first the House bills and then the Senate bills. And I wrote out the Senate bill and House bills so that it'd be easy to link, and hopefully you won't have a problem linking directly to the bill. So if you click on the Senate bill, what do we have here, 2096, should be able to bring up the bill. I did a quick link, and this is a test, and it works. So please feel free to use that as sort of a shortcut if you want to take a look at the bill. If you're downloading the table and have it on your iPad, then you can quickly go to the bill that is being discussed at the committee hearing. Okay. And then in the last column will be priorities, comments, and notes. And so those are the areas I'll fill in those blanks as we move through the session. I believe that covers it, Patricia. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And so the last thing I just wanted to point out to everyone, we did about a 45-minute brief introduction to the advocacy and health policy process. However, we do have a 3-hour webinar on empowering nurses to lead as part of our leadership webinar series. It has everything you ever wanted to know about how it describes past legislative policy decisions, how nursing has influenced political process, and ways that you can ensure your voice is heard. So it has quite a bit more detail about all of the different processes. You can get to that webinar on our website. So I'd like to thank everyone for attending today. I am going to stop the recording and then open the lines up for questions.